Good evening. This is Perrysburg City Council for November 16, 2021. Please call the roll.
Ms. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Coleman?
Here.
Ms. Materney? Here. Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Van Hoosen?
Here.
Mr. Weber?
Here. If you're able, please stand and join me and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes of council from November 2nd.
Yeah, so we actually have two meeting minutes to approve here. We'll start with the city council meeting itself. Everyone has received a copy. I have not heard of anybody. I don't see anybody speaking up about any changes. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes of city council meeting held on November 2nd, 2021 as written and dispense with the reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Materney?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
All right, we also had a copy of the meeting minutes of the committee of the whole meeting that was held prior to that council meeting. If there is no objections, I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the city council committee of the whole on November 2nd as written, dispense with the reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Materney?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes. We have no special reports, letters of communications and citizens' concerns. Something other than what's on the agenda item. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Aaron Bortz, 878 Elm Street. We live across from Municipal Park. We're kind of like positioned right across the pool. It's been a rough summer for us in terms of the level of activity going on at the park. It's a range of things. It's a multitude of things from either, cars with loud mufflers trolling the streets continuously for hours on end to a lot of nefarious activity going on at the basketball courts, things that I don't necessarily think should be going on in City Park. I have multiple examples. I won't get into all of them tonight. I can tell you the latest example, however, is what really tipped the scales for us. One of the groups that's typically there who gives the younger kids a hard time, my daughter was down there on last Wednesday night with her service dog and got into a bit of unfortunately, a conversation with them. She didn't solicit the conversation, but they did. And it ultimately ended up with, a couple of high school kids and probably junior high kids chasing my 12-year-old daughter and her dog through the parking lot at the pool, threatening to shoot and kill the dog and kick the dog. Again, without getting into a bunch of specifics, we decided to walk the neighborhood on Sunday. And, this is a small sampling of the people we talked to, but I will guarantee you that every door we knocked on, everybody has a story of some things that are going on at Municipal Park. And we've lived there for 18 years. It's really just been about the last 12 to 14 months that it's kind of been getting bad. If I had to guess, I would say we probably called the police between my wife and I alone probably 8 to 12 times since the beginning of the summer. And everybody we talked to on the street has called the police at some point in time. And I'll just kind of leave everything at that. I think the police have responded as they can, but I think that we need to maybe escalate this a little bit and dig in deeper to see how we can squash the problem, because, again, everybody I talk to, nobody feels safe sending their kids down to Municipal Park alone. That's kind of the long and the short of it. Again, I can get as detailed as you want. I can cite as many examples, but I don't want to overstep my bounds in terms of time.
What I would suggest, and first off, of course, I think it's for everybody up here we're sad to hear that. I mean, it is certainly just a park, and we want it to be used by as many people as possible, but we also don't want it to be used in a way that is not safe for the residents to use. And so, what I would suggest is, have you spoken to Chief Jones?
Yeah, so I'm an Exchange Club member. He was in the other night. We had some conversation about it. I've talked to probably 6 of your police force, just in various times when we have to call the cops and we go down there and we meet them there. There was a kid running around with a taser one night. This isn't getting squashed. So it's been going on since probably, like I said, May, when the weather started to break. And it started with just the cars and the mufflers, and that was just annoying enough because you're trying to sit on your deck in the summer and enjoy things. The activity and the level of people that are kind of infiltrating the park is very different from the people that are playing pickleball and tennis. There's an ancillary group that's hanging out and causing problems, and we see kids vaping down there. I know they're not old enough to vape, and I don't even know what's in the vape. And so we're, again, with my wife and I and most of these people, we've lived on this street we've been there 18 years, and we've got to stop this because I got people talking about wanting to move in what they consider their dream home.
Okay, well, I think I can't do anything tonight, but I know the administration, the law director and the administrator and myself, the chief, we have a meeting tomorrow where we go over things that come up with council, and so we will certainly talk about this with the chief, and I would suspect that we have your email and those other.
Patrick Jones, yes, he does. Just tell him it's Aaron Boards. From the Exchange Club, he'll know who I am.
No, so we'll follow up with you, and I think that that's certainly something we want to be mindful of, and we also want to make sure that that's not something we get a handle on, because I think you've identified the exact problem.
Yes.
Issue by inaction is leading to worse behavior, kind of. So.
And by no means am I throwing anybody under the bus in terms of saying we called somebody didn't do anything or anything like that. We're here to be a part of the solution,
Right.
for sure.
I know we actually have this in the upcoming budget. We do have cameras set aside for municipal park as well. Do you know? I'm sure you probably don't know. I don't know if the administrator knows where exactly those cameras are and how often those will be monitored, because we are including cameras in the budget for the park.
So they'll be 24-hour. I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about. What potentially is a range of things, because it sounds like some of the areas that need attention are not near what I would describe as the core function. So it's okay to have cameras, but they need to be able to see the conduct that we need to see. So that's something we're probably going to talk about.
And one more, it's like you go a certain range, and everybody, if it's in front of them, they see it. You go 2 or 3 houses this way, and they're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's fairly localized in terms of that, which is potentially a good thing. But if we could focus on literally to all of us, it's taking back our street and our park because we feel like we've lost it.
Okay.
We really do.
Mr. Morris, something that I think that makes sense is if you had community policing and you had some police officers that might walk that beat or be in that area and kind of patrol that neighborhood. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, just having a presence, or just park an empty police car there, and let them think someone's walking around. I mean, do any kind of deterrent you can come up with.
We were a little aware of the situation, so we had talked about it in service, and so we were already planning on, Jonathan Smith said, getting cameras for that part.
Administration's been working on it. So I think we'll follow up and we'll reach out back out to you as the point person for the group.
Please.
Okay.
All right.
I appreciate you bringing the concern and how you've done it. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, have a good night.
And I warned Karen that if we don't leave now, we're going to be here for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Thank you to the group. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, I have administrative reports. I have no report. Does council want to pass a resolution during your...
We can do it during the president. It's up to you. If you're comfortable with the waiting for the president council,
We'll just wait for the president council. Because it's a council action, but administration certainly fully supports Small Business Saturday. City administrator.
No report.
Finance director.
I have no report.
Law director.
No report.
Thank you. President council.
Mayor, with what Mayor mentioned at his report.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I do need to recommend
Yes.
Mary Richter to be on the Way Public Library Board.
So with that, as everyone was here for the appointment review committee, that was unanimously passed, and I believe it was unanimously passed in the finance committee as well. So I'm going to make the motion to appoint Mary Richter to the waiver report.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
All right, I'd also like to introduce Resolution 65, 2021, and move the rules be suspended, allow for reading by number and title only, dispense with the second and third reading.
Second?
Roll call?
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Resolution 65, 2021, Small Business Saturday, November 27th, 2021. Recognizing November 27th, 2021 as Small Business Saturday and supporting awareness of the value of our small businesses.
All right, I move that Resolution 65, 2021 be passed.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call?
Yes, I would like to say that I think small business is very important to our community, and I'm glad that we support it. I think it's very important.
Roll call?
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
All right, and then the final item under the President and Council report is the presentation of the water sewer rate study. So we've had this twice now with the Public Utilities Committee. We have Michael Magger here to go over the rate study with us and to bring this to council as a whole before we make a determination, which will probably not be happening until at least another meeting or so. So give us enough time to sit through, look it over, and make sure we're all comfortable with it. So hopefully Mr. Baker is available. There he goes. All right, thank you, Mr. Baker.
Good evening. Yes, thank you. So I have a brief presentation for those of you on the Public Utilities Committee. A lot of us should be familiar. For those not, feel free to stop me with questions along the way and attempt to share my screen. Probably going to need the enable screen.
Oh, let me see here. That should work for you, Michael.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just the table of contents for this presentation. I'm going to go over the study assumptions. That's just things like inflation, growth rates. The revenue requirements are just the revenue required to be collected from customers. It's just a fancy term for the cost of the system. Your fund balances, so your operating and capital fund balances. Current charges and rates, so what customers currently pay now, and then our recommended charges and rates over the next 5 years. And then looking, of course, at some sample bills. So we say a lot of customers don't really care what their rate is, they want what their bill is going to be. So we'll look at some sample bills and then a comparison to some surrounding communities and then our recommendations. So some of the guiding principles and objectives of the study. So the water and sewer systems must each be financially self-supporting. So you really shouldn't be having one subsidize the other. You can certainly make transfers between them, but you want to make sure you pay those back in a reasonable amount of time. The utility should maintain reserves, provide for contingencies and unplanned expenses. That's things like an operating or a rainy day fund, and then a capital reserve for emergency repairs. Water and sewer rates should be kept as low as possible over time. And you'll see that italicized over time there, because you can defer maintenance and not invest in your system and have really low rates, but at some point you're going to have a really large main break or something like that. That's going to be a big issue. So the key is to keep rates low over time. So our objectives to ensure rates are stable, do sound financial management, system maintenance. And we do that by reviewing the funds, and looking at the long-term plan, including your capital improvement plan. So some factors that affect charges and rates for operating maintenance expenses is going to be your salaries, your benefits, materials, things like that. Your largest expense from operating side is really the purchase of water from Toledo. You don't have a lot of control over that. It's simply a pass-through cost because you're buying the water from them. The big factor there is whatever increases they're passing along, you have to then incorporate the deal rates. Everything else, we're just using an inflationary factor of 3%. That may be going up in the future, considering what inflation is right now, but right now we've chosen in the model to use 3%. Capital improvement plans. So since you're buying your water from Toledo, you don't have to worry about water treatment, but you will have to work on your CIP water distribution, what we call sewage collection, and then wastewater treatment. Any debt service, so that's any existing payments you have right now, that's the principal and interest payments. And if you have any capital projects or you need debt funded, really large projects, we then calculate the debt for those and add that on to an existing debt. Customer changes, so we look at your recent history of changes in accounts the past 5 years or so, and it's looked like you've been adding about 1% growth of customers per year. However, we also look at your water usage, your water consumption that's referred to, and then your sewage generation. So essentially, the water in is the sewage out. And that, over the past 4 or 5 years, it's been roughly 0% growth there. So we're seeing, and this is not unique to the city, all across the country, we may be adding customers, but we're seeing those customers using less on a per capita basis. So some places we're actually seeing declining usage based on conservation, low flow fixtures, things of that nature. And then miscellaneous revenue changes, anything other than your minimum charges and rates. We're just being conservative here and say there's no growth in that. And then those 2 cash balances I mentioned. For the operating one, we're looking at 90 days of operating expenses, so roughly 25% of your operating expenses kept in a rainy day fund. And then for capital, after discussion with staff, we're looking to have these at about 1 year average capital costs for each water and sewer. I think for water it's about $3 million, and then sewer it's about $2 million. So the revenue requirement, as I mentioned before, this is simply just the cost of the system. So let's start with your operating maintenance expenses, salaries, benefits, material supplies, things like that. And obviously the big one there is the purchase of water from Toledo. Any outstanding debt, so that's both your current debt and then the future debt based on the CIP projects you plan to debt fund. And then your capital improvement projects, so you're going to be funding for rates. So we add all that up, we call that the annual revenue requirement. We then less out any miscellaneous revenues, and that's really how much you need to collect from customers. This is a snapshot of your capital projects over the next 5 years. So you can see the water there ranging from roughly $2 million in 2022, about 1.5 in 26. Sewer, you can see we'll do a little bit more on capital there, about 3.8 in 22, going up to almost 7 million in 24, and 3.3 in 26. And then there's just some bulleted projects down there, just showing you some of the larger water and sewer projects. And then this is actually broken down by funding source. So you can see for water, we're planning on funding all of the capital projects through rate revenue, and then sewer, we're using some rate revenue as well as a capital fund. So as I mentioned before, the target was to have 1 year average worth of capital projects in each fund. And so right now your capital fund for sewer is higher than that minimum. So we're actually using some of that fund to pay for some of these projects. And that way we're mitigating how much we need to collect from customers. And so we're actually keeping rate increases lower for sewer. So here is just graphically what the revenue requirements look like. And then in comparison, how much revenue you're bringing in right now. So these blue bars you see for the next 5-6 years, that's your operating expenses. And the green is your cash fund and capital projects stacked on top of that. And then the orange there is actually contribution to the capital fund for water. So water is not at where we'd like it to be in that minimum. So we're actually making these $500,000 contributions in years 22, 23, 24. And then it gets to that average balance. And then the blue line going across horizontally there, that's your current revenue. Anytime that line is lower than the bars, that means your revenue is less than your expenses. And so we actually need to be increased there. So the darker blue line that's kind of sloping up and to the right, that's our proposed revenue increases. So revenue are recommended increases. And you see that note at the bottom, that blue line represents an 8% increase in 22, an 8% increase in 23, and then 3% for the next 3 years for water. Turning to sewer, again we have the blue bars being your operating expenses. As sewer has some current debt service, that's the red, and the green is the cash fund capital projects. You can see how the capital fund is not real straightforward. It's kind of lumpy when you do a capital improvement plan. You have some big projects in some years, some small ones in others. So by doing the 5-year, we kind of smooth out those lumpy increases. On sewer, the fund's a little better off. We only need about 2% every year in the next 5 years, as opposed to the water, it's a little bit of a higher increase. So turning to the operating fund balances, this is actual cash at hand. So this shows the balances based on the proposed revenue. So you can see for water, as you mentioned, we're kind of building this up over time to get to that 90 days target by 2026. So that's where the blue being your current balance, meeting or exceeding that target red line. And then for sewer, as you mentioned, you've got more than you currently need to fill that balance, so we're actually using some of that to pay down the capital. Same thing on the capital fund balances. As I mentioned with water, we're adding those $500,000 contributions in 22, 23, 24 until we meet that target amount. And with sewer, since we've already met that target amount, we're actually using some of these funds to pay for your capital projects. So that way you don't have to raise the increase. This is similar to those charts. This is more just in a tabular format, I suppose. So looking at the starting operating balance for each year, then adding in any rate revenue, adding in miscellaneous revenue, lessing out the operating expenses, and then since most of the revenues are just showing up in operating, we then make a transfer to the capital balance to pay for the capital projects. So then down the bottom, we see the capital fund starting balance. For water, we have those contributions to the fund, 22, 23, 24. We don't have any debt service, and then lessening out the capital projects, then the contribution, and then the transfer from the operating fund. So you can see the starting balances and the ending balances, which should match the graphs in the former slides. Same thing for sewer, starting with the operating balance and showing the ending balance. Same thing on capital, so that we end up with those minimum balances by the end of the 5th year. So your current charges and rates, the water table at the top, you have a monthly minimum charge, which includes 300 cubic feet allowance. You have inside city and outside city customers. So for your inside city customer, for water, you pay $20.26 per month. With that, you get 300 cubic feet. And then if you go beyond the 300 cubic feet, you then pay per 1,000 cubic feet. You can see the rates there. So $67.53 for inside city, $77.66 for outside. Sewer, a little more complicated. You have some customers who have 1 meter, some customers have 2 meters, and then you have some customers who don't receive treatment from the city. In the Northwest, if they receive treatment from, they pay a separate. But again, you have a monthly minimum charge, includes 300, and you have a volumetric rate. You go over that 300, 1,000 cubic feet. So simply taking those current rates, increasing those by the projected revenue increases we showed before. This is what the rates will be in the next 5 years for each water and sewer. As I mentioned before, a lot of customers aren't really interested in what the rates are, they want what the bill is. So this is a comparison of some customer bills. So we have, for residential, we have a small user, a medium user, and a large user. So if we focus on that medium user, that second line, that's somebody who uses 500 cubic feet. So roughly half your customers do less than 500, half do more than 500 for the residential customers. So a customer bill right now for somebody who's a medium user pays $67.85. That would go up to $71.23, or roughly a 5% increase, or a $3.38 increase per month. And then the next year it would go up about $3.60, another 5%, and then after that about 2.5% each year. So $1.89, $1.94, and then $2. And that's per month. Taking that median usage and then seeing what that bill would be if you paid a water and sewer bill in a different community, and comparing that to Perrysburg. You can see the blue here is a water bill, the green is a sewer bill, and the total is to the right of the bars. You can see Perrysburg currently is about the middle of the pack, and then it will be just slightly higher than that next year. What this does not account for is any of these other communities, if they're planning on doing a rate increase. That would not be shown. This only reflects the current rates that we were going to obtain from those communities. So our recommendations to adopt the recommended charge and rates for planning period. The next 5 years. But at the same time, you can set those rates, but you have to revisit them. We recommend looking at the financial model, putting in your actual numbers, pull the projected numbers to see kind of where you fall. If the rate projections for the next 5 years are still adequate, then that's great, you don't have to touch them, but otherwise you become revisit. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
why is Monroe so much less than Perrysburg? I think it's only about 40 something.
It's Monroe County Insight. Yeah, so there's many reasons why it's tough to do an apples to apples, right? Topography, environment, governance, it could be maybe some general fund subsidies. I don't know exactly what's going on in Monroe County. Economies of scale, they're larger, they maybe will some economies of scale there. I don't know if they're buying water from Toledo. So yeah, it's tough to, if anybody on staff has more insight in terms of what's going on in Monroe County, they need that help. But yeah, you have to take that into consideration. There's a lot of apples and oranges comparisons. While it calculates the bill of what it would be if somebody else lived there and they use that much usage, there's all sorts of different differentiating.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
We asked a lot of questions at the Public Utilities Committee meeting, so.
Yeah.
Mine got answered there.
All right, thank you very
There's
much.
a lot to take in. If you have questions further on, feel free to reach out to Al, something.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that will be the end of the President's of Council report. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for showing up and speaking to you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. Committee reports. Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Finance and Economic Development Committee met on November 9th. Meeting was called to order 5:30 p.m. by Chairperson Mark Weber. Committee members present were Deborah Bourne and myself. Tim McCarthy was not present. Also present were Bridget Cabot, City Administrator, Amber Rathburn, Finance Director, and Kayla Trego, Deputy Finance Director. There being no objections, the minutes of the October 12th meeting were approved. And the appointment of Mary Richter, which we had that finalized tonight, went very well. We asked her a few questions and acknowledged that she, Ms. Richter, is part of the Country Garden Club, which has done a lot of good for the community. And Ms. Bourne stated that she had known Ms. Richter for years and thinks that she'll be an outstanding member of the board. Committee agreed 2-0 to recommend Ms. Richter to the Appointment Review Committee. Resolutions for the use of the internet auction and sale of surplus property. Ms. Rathburn explained that the Ohio Revised Code requires the city to pass legislation annually authorizing us to sell surplus items on the internet. The resolution for 2021 is being requested as an emergency measure, but the second resolution is not an emergency measure because it is for the calendar year of 2022. Ms. Bourne asked for clarification on the meaning of municipality-owned personal property, and Ms. Rathburn explained that anything of value over $1,000 the city would sell first would come before the committee. So the committee agreed 2-0 to pass these resolutions on to council. Amending the food truck ordinance to accept the applications, Ms. Rathburn explained that they currently accept applications after March 1st and are asking to move that to January 1st of every year. The fees will be staying the same, and as administration is not proposing any changes at this time. Ms. Bourne asked when the date normally was. Ms. Cabot explained that it was normally March 1st, and that the permit was only good until the end of the year. The committee agreed 2-0 to pass this amended ordinance to council. This is it's going to work out well for any Winterfest events that we may have if there's one of the food trucks. Discussion of the 2022 budget. Ms. Bourne asked about the 3rd Street sanitary sewer replacement and if the amount was still accurate. Ms. Cabot said that yes, it is the number in the utilities budget. Ms. Bourne also asked about the erosion control around Three Meadows Pond And Ms. Cabot stated that they're requesting to do the remaining 2/3 around the pond, and that we can take a look at doing a pathway around once the erosion control part is completed. Ms. Bourne added that there has been a lot of talk during PrAC about having a natural walking path around the pond. I asked about handicap parking down by Riverside Park and if there will be any money in the budget for that. Ms. Cabot answered that there is not anything in the initial budget, but once we get the numbers back, it is something that could be proposed in the amended budget. Ms. Bourne asked about the retaining wall that was mentioned in that project and where it would be located. Ms. Cabot explained that it would be on Water Street because in order to add parking spaces, there would first have to be a retaining wall on the south side of Water Street, and that we're still in the information gathering phase in that project. Ms. Cabot also added that they have been working with Rotary Foundation and have numbers for 8 pickleball courts out at Rotary Park. The plan is for the foundation to raise the funds, turn the funds over to the city, and have the city bid for and manage the project. This should be cost neutral to the city. And Ms. Rathburn stated that the budget went down $88,000 due to an error typo in the pool budget. That was also addressed to the rec committee in their budget talks. Finance director's report. I asked if the legal fees that were for the wage rate study was the same law firm that we used, and Ms. Cabot stated that those fees were actually for the IAFF arbitrations. I asked about Turner Concrete and the sidewalk connection of 203 West Front Street, and Ms. Cabot said that they are working towards Front Street having a continuous sidewalk and only have one more house to go. I also asked for an explanation on business card that was in our in expenses over $5,000, and Ms. Rathburn explained that that is listed as business card, but it's really the City Bank of America credit card, or BOA. Ms. Bourne asked about Louisiana sanitary sewer investigation and what that is about. Ms. Cabot stated she believes they suspected a leak in the storm sewer on Louisiana Avenue. Ms. Bourne also asked about Parham Electric and when it will be completed, and she's referring to the Elm, Louisiana intersection. Ms. Cabot explained that they are still waiting for traffic signal controllers due to the supply chain issue. Ms. Rathburn stated that for health insurance funding, we are remaining steady around $200,000 for our fund balance, and that there are still a couple of big claims out there that we are expecting. Another business, I asked about the income tax not being on the agenda, and which Ms. Cabot reminded me that they explained that they will be doing these on the live quarterly updates, but we'll still get monthly reports. And I asked if we were still waiting on guidelines for the CARES Act money, and Ms. Cabot said that she would like to meet with Jonathan Smith, President of City Council, and that they have received the first half of the allocation. And I asked how much we received. Ms. Rathburn explained that we received $1.1 million for the first half, for a total of $2.2 million. The second half of the money, the city will receive in approximately 1 year from now. Ms. Bourne stated that she would like to see police and fire receive some of that money, and Ms. Cabot said that she will make a note of that. There being no further business, the meeting adjourned at 5:52. So I will be introducing 4 pieces of legislation tonight individually, beginning with the second reading of the ordinance for the 2022 budget. So I would like to introduce ordinance 54, 2021, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Materney?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Gruzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 54, 2021.
You are the only participant in the
Making
conference.
appropriations for
Please press any key on your keypad to remain in the conference.
and other expenditures for the city of Harrisburg, Wood County, Ohio,
Press
for the
1
fiscal year
to
ending
then press-
December 1st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
I know it's a reading, if you don't mind, I just would like to make one quick comment that, with the new implementation that we've had with the security out front, I think that's something we could have a comment with the feedback. One of the questions I wanted to ask is what the cost is for that additional security out there. So far from what I asked Ms. Cabot, she reached out, said since July that cost has been about $30,000 for the security for the last 4 months. So if we extrapolate that, I'm going to assume that's about $90,000 to $100,000 a year. for the security out front there. I know that there's some conversations regarding restructuring the administration building at some points, but honestly, the cost seems to be pretty high, and I don't know if there's something that we can do on that. I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
I think I brought that up at safety committee. I was asking Chief Jones, how he went about staffing that. He said that usually he hasn't really added staff, if I'm correct in saying that he uses, kind of rotates some of their officers in and out.
Currently, during the day, they are rotating officers off patrol in for a couple hours stint, and then they're back out on patrol. In the evenings, they're trying to utilize second shift officers as well, but that doesn't always work out because that happens to be kind of like the busiest time is second shift. So there's times then when we bring somebody in on overtime to work those hours while there's council or committee meetings or commission meetings that are taking place in the building. If the budget is approved as is, there's 3 additional police officers proposed in that budget. One of those will be assigned to first shift. 2 of them will probably end up on second shift because, again, that is our busiest shift. And then the goal would be to rotate those out throughout the shift during the time period where there's staffing needs in the atrium for council, committee, commission meetings. That would be the goal.
So I know that I received at least one complaint from one committee where there was no one there until about 5 minutes before the committee started. And the individual was sitting out there. So I guess the question is, if we're doing overtime for the second shift, it's a busier shift, is this a conversation we should be having about having the security open or having the building open during council and committee meetings versus having security out there? We saw some issues that we've had as well, which I'm sure that we're still working with the first land use plan discussion with trying to get people through the door. And that's something that I don't want our citizens to feel that they are, I'm not saying that they wouldn't feel welcome, but to make it difficult for them to come to an open meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I would say we're very aware of that concern. As you recall, there was security, we were one of the last buildings in back up. Every building that is a public building in Wood County has some security. Ours was the one that has people coming in on a regular basis. All the county buildings, the courthouses, there is some expectation of being able to conduct the business of the community in a safe way. As you also recall, it was kind of didn't have it because of the nature of the building, and then we had some instances where staff was at risk. So I recognize that as an additional cost, but there is a safety and security issue for staff that I think has to be we have to be aware of and make sure the staff feels comfortable being able to come to work and work in a safe environment. We have people who, with no security, were readily exposed to people who just walked in the door. So we're willing to, I'm more than happy to think about different ways to do that and to see what security measures are or aren't. I do think also, unfortunately, the first round of land use, that was just kind of just over capacity. I mean, I think that can be addressed now that we know. We also had too many people in the room. We had some other things that happened, so we have to take care of that. But unfortunately also, given today's climate, it seems a little bit naive to say that we shouldn't have security for people coming into the building.
To clarify, Mayor, really the concern I am more focused on is more in the evening.
Yeah.
And if we have overtime that's coming in the evening, maybe I mean, for me on council, I'm not as concerned as with the staff during the day when they have so many different people coming in. But I do have a concern when, we've had the backup. Yes, there was a capacity issue. And I know that Councilman Coleman has brought up about having cameras in here in some ways to connect the public in the past, so we wouldn't have to go through those capacity issues either. If we could at least find some ways to set up an atrium. But maybe it's been a while since I've been to other community council meetings or or other community government meetings, but I don't recall having to go through security and enter into.
Walney, Bowling Green, Sylvania, Waterville, all have.
But it's slightly different, I would say, in the fact that those buildings don't have police departments directly connected to the building, do they?
Walney, I don't know.
Like it's, I mean, I feel like our entrance is completely different than those.
Those areas. We'll want to look. We want to have to look at ways to make it. I mean, it's not the most efficient access point anyway. We're trying to look at what needs to be done to this building. So.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that we're spending. It's not a critique at all. I get the security thing, and I want our staff to feel safe while they're here, but it's a bad look when we're paying a police officer out there for night meetings for a group of 20 people. We have a problem in Municipal Park that people are coming and complaining about. So it's just one of
Well,
those.
they're not mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive, and I think we would also, the security issue at Municipal Park is certainly something we need to address, but there's also a security issue here. I mean, so I'm more than happy to talk about it with the chief and the administration, because we want people to have. I feel like they can. The joke should be open to the public. They should have a right to come be able to be heard, but we do also have to make sure that it's a safe environment as well.
I would add to some comments that Jonathan had. I've heard the same from a lot of individuals who have said to me that it makes a deterrent for them not wanting to come to the city building, and they feel this is on the taxpayers and should be able to come in and attend meetings. I've had people tell me that they cannot get in because either someone's not here or no one notified the police department that there was a meeting. I've heard a lot of those comments as well.
I wish you would, and as I've said multiple times, I wish you would share those comments and
I
addresses.
just did.
Well, let me finish. Individuals, so that we can talk to them, see exactly what meeting they were trying to come to, when they were here, and what happened, because we don't want that to, we don't need that to be repeated. So if you can get that information to me, we'd have to call.
Once upon a time, we wouldn't even be talking about this, but if you look at the Homeland Security recommendations and federal guidelines and stuff from schools on up the line, we're making a million calls by doing this. Which also, if you think about it from the other side, protects us from certain liabilities.
But we're more than happy to keep that discussion going.
I think the biggest thing we focus on is what we feel is some of that cost of doing overtime. I appreciate hearing that we're having 3 new officers, but it's just something that I really want us to focus on. If we're going to be looking at restructuring the building, let's move on a little more quickly than our restructuring efforts or whatever it is for when anyone else trying to go through quickly is not necessarily the correct way to say things, but anything we can do to try to help and save some of the dollars, and I think would be appreciated. That's all I really wanted to mention today. I'm sure we'll have probably much more discussion.
I didn't realize you could put a price on human life.
I don't think I put in any price in human life, but there's some ways to be more efficient, and that's not something government is pretty good at.
Okay. Yeah. Any other discussion on the budget before I move on? Okay. All righty. I would like to introduce.
I do. So we're past that next time.
Yes.
So
yeah, the next time
again,
we'll finish reading.
and I've said this to council since we've been in administration. If you have any questions or concerns, please give them to us ahead of time so we can make sure that they're addressed at the meeting, so that I think it would expedite the passage, which we hope that the council will consider, but also any issues or concerns can be, we'll have background information that we can provide.
Okay. It'll be voted on the first meeting in December. Okay. All right. I would like to introduce Ordinance 57, 2021, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second. Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 57, 2021, amending codified ordinance 813.03 of the City of Perrysburg codified ordinances codified by ordinance 52, 2017, and passed on August 1st, 2017.
I move that ordinance 57, 2021 be passed.
I have discussion.
Second, discussion.
I didn't notice first of all, I'd like to say I voted for this in the Finance Committee because I wanted this to go to City Council. Secondly, I would like to say that I'm not voting for this because I have seen no reason to see food trucks in the wintertime, particularly in January and February, when we have the most snow and the most ice. So I think March through December is certainly significant enough. Thank you.
I do have a quick question on related note with the food truck ordinance here is, I know we've had some complaints from some residents regarding some of the food truck operations. Has those been resolved at this point, or where are we at on what we did?
I think Judge Weber can answer that question, but thanks to Mr. Weber, he resolved that issue for us.
Well, thank you, Councilman Weber.
Sure.
You and I met.
Pardon me? Oh, local routes? Oh, yeah, the local routes one? Oh, yeah, that we took care of. Yes.
Actually, simple fix.
That was a simple, we went there and we listened to that generator from all different angles and talked with the owner. They were very cooperative and agreed to build a little plywood shelter to stop that. And I talked with the homeowners that were affected by it, and they seemed satisfied at the time. And more of a that takes care of that food truck. Let's see what happens with the next food truck that comes, and we'll just have to deal with it if another food truck comes that's not complying. But for now, he's moved it a couple times. That I've gone there several times when he's been there. He's moved it a couple times. He's trying to help out as much as possible. And homeowners seem satisfied. He's probably done for the year, I'm sure. Okay, that's the only one you were talking about? Nothing out on Louisiana Avenue?
No, that was just the one that I know we've received a few complaints on, so I just wanted to follow up on that.
Okay.
But
Actually, would add that the homeowners have also chatted a lot with me about it as well, and said they do not want to have any more food trucks coming by there because they work from home, and it's a hindrance on their working ability, and one individual has health issues. So that's was brought to my attention.
Yes, but I had the same conversation with them, and they understand that they're allowed to be there, that we can't tell them they can't come. They understand the ordinance. So we're just trying to come to some common ground and see that they just be a little more courteous to the neighbors, and that's worked out quite well. All right.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ms. Bourne?
No.
I would like to introduce Resolution 63-2021 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Resolution 63, 2021, a resolution declaring the intent and authorizing the sale of municipal-owned personal property which is not needed for public use or is obsolete or unfit for the use in which it was acquired during the calendar year 2021 by internet auction and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 63-2021 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Okay. Last one, I would like to introduce Resolution 64-2021 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Ms. Bourne?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Duzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Resolution 64, 2021, a resolution declaring the intent and authorizing the sale of municipal-owned personal property which is not needed for public use or is obsolete or unfit for the use in which it was acquired during the calendar year 2022 by internet auction.
I move that resolution 64-2021 be passed.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ms. Dorn?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
The next Finance and Economic Development Committee is scheduled for Tuesday, December 14th at 5:30 p.m. End of my report.
Thank you. Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do not have a report. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 23rd, Tuesday at 6 p.m. if necessary.
Thank you. Recreation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The meeting was called to order, and this was on November 9th at 6:29 p.m. by Chairperson Deborah Warren. Committee members present were Deborah Warren, Jane Attorney, and Jonathan Smith, teleconferencing. Also present was Amber Rathburn, Director of Finance. Under approval of administration report for October 12th, 2021 meeting, Ms. Warren stated that she had not received the administration report. If they submit a report later, it can be received at the regular meeting. Addendum, an administration report was submitted after the meeting, which will be reviewed at the next regular meeting. Under old business, there was no old business discussed except the proposed ice hockey arena. Mr. Smith mentioned that the ice hockey arena, which he said that Sylvania levy had failed, and that the change caused delays. Ms. Warren asked about the potential location on US 25. Mr. Smith responded that there was no need to do a study of the situation at Tam O'Shanter until the situation at Tam O'Shanter is resolved. Ms. Warren then asked if he is raising money privately. Mr. Smith responded that he was looking for a public-private partnership. Ms. Matroni stated that she was leaning toward not supporting this project and wanted more information. Ms. Warren agreed. Crack report. Ms. Warren said that the crack committee met on Monday, November 1st. They will not meet again until April 2022. They had lengthy discussion about several topics, among them the goal of being good stewards for the environment. There were concerns that the committee's motions are not being considered by City Council. One of them is opposition to paving Orleans parking lot. Others are the creation of a natural walking path around Three Meadows Pond, a possible passive park in the Hawthorne development, a heater for the pool, and eliminating the lights at Woodland Park around the sculptures since these cause light pollution. Ms. Warren suggested that the lights be toned down around the statues. They were also concerned about communication with the administration. Administrator Cabot is planning to meet with some members of PRAC to discuss this. Under new business, Finance Director Amber Rathburn was present to answer questions about budget items affecting recreation. She reviewed all budget items in this category. Chairwoman Warren asked if a heater for the pool be included in the budget. Ms. Rathburn said that she would check on it. When Ms. Rathburn mentioned a 5% increase in salary for pool employees, Ms. Warren stated that she thought the maximum permitted increase was 3%. Ms. Rathburn said that she would look this up. Ms. Matroni asked what was the reason for wanting a pool heater. Ms. Warren mentioned that the PRAC members think that the water is too cold. Mr. Smith stated that he agreed with Chairwoman Warren about the 3% maximum net wage increase. Chairwoman Warren asked what parks are going to have cameras installed. Ms. Rathburn stated that she thought Rivercrest was one, but would check on the others. See attached document for further information. Under good of the order, Ms. Matroni congratulated Perrysburg High School cross-country girls cross-country team for winning the state championship. Ms. Warren and Mr. Smith agreed. Ms. Warren added that when she attended Perrysburg High School, the girls volleyball team also won the state championship. The next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, December 14th 2021 at 6:30 p.m. Report prepared by Deborah L. Warren, Chair, November 16, 2021. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much.
Just one bit of discussion on that. About the lights at Woodland Park. I met with Robin Ballmer Saturday night. We went out there to install the solar lights that she purchased. She had purchased for the. There's 5 sculptures that are not on the regular pads that have the regular electric lights. So we installed the solar ones on those and looked over all the other ones. And yes, those each pad has 4 lights shining up. The ones are along the entrance drive work out real well. They're shining all on the sculptures. There's 5 of them along East Boundary that Rob and I both agree that the two that are on the side of the street facing right at the sculptures are great. The 2 behind that are shining towards the street are really more a problem because they're shining into the eyes of definitely walkers and maybe drivers, and there really is no need to light the backside of those 5 sculptures because behind them is just trees and a little mound. See what I mean? So, yeah, so it's just, if it's possible, just to disconnect the 2 back ones or tone those down in some sort. I don't know if there's different levels of light on those LEDs. I know in the solar ones we had 2 different levels of light.
I do not believe that these have I'll say.
I didn't see any adjustment on it.
Robin is the one who insisted on all 4 corners being lit.
Oh, yes, and I know, and she acknowledged that she assisted in it, I guess, and she just, I think her comments were she wasn't certain they were going to be that bright. The LED is not really a warm white, it's a really cool white. And even in fact, there's a couple of them that if they just be pointed up a little bit, maybe they wouldn't be a distraction. But if you can have someone look at that,
the electrician.
But overall, they all look really great. We took some photos, and I think one made the newspapers. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Ms. Campbell, to add to that, I think I asked someone about that, about the light usage, and I think they said something about there's a level 4, does that sound right? That you can get with an LED light.
Typically,
that's not as
LEDs
bright.
come in lumens. And a typical light for a street light is about 3,000 lumens. I'm not sure what the lumen is on these lights. I'll have to ask. What a 4,000 lumen would be even brighter.
But I'm saying that was a 4, I think might be the number 4 possibly, that was 2 that.
Unaware of what that would mean in translating into a LED wattage.
Yeah, my understanding was that it's supposed to be less, not as bright.
We'll follow up.
We'll follow up. Another talk with Ms. Ballmer.
Okay. Thanks. We're going out there doing it.
Yeah.
All right, planning zoning.
Thank you, Arnold. We met on November 10th. You don't have your minutes yet. They came to me today, and the events of today didn't put me any time to get a good look at it. So you will receive a final copy of the story. I'll kind of summarize this as best I can. The first item that night was the land use plan update. And Paul Velazquez was present via Zoom, and he urged us to make a decision as to how we want to handle the heights and land use plan as quickly as we could. I believe in an earlier committee meeting, we told the group that we would put the issue of the heights here on the top of the list to try and get a final plan on what to do with that. I commented that I guess I could have formed the motion, although we never really formally voted on it, to remove the heights as a focus area from the land use plan. I didn't think, and I don't think it's right to include a plan for them when they're not even part of the city. Mr. Coleman generally agreed, but he felt it would be wise to leave it into the extent of labeling it as a legacy community, and I agree with that comment as well. Mr. Van Hoosen he was trying to get some clarity from Paul on whether the heights wanted to be removed simply as a focus group or just removed from the land use plan as a whole. And Barry pointed out they were left in the plan, it would be labeled residential legacy, but he expressed the concern that more commercial properties will infringe on the heights, as has been happening. Brody Walters put up a brave defense for keeping the heights in as a focus area. He felt that doing so helped make it a stronger planning document for future councils, developers, and the court, if it ever came to that. He and Mark Easterly both talked about going back to the drawing board and spending time in that focus area, because taking the heights out of the plan altogether does not achieve their goal. I think the goal is to protect the neighborhood. Part of that further review would be to give input on what their vision is for their own neighborhood. My thought was that there's not a great level of trust out there right now between the heights and the city. Paul Velazquez did suggest to take the heights out of the land use plan and maintain it as a legacy neighborhood, as has been true in prior plans. He did express, though, that if there are additional protections that could be put in place to protect future development, he would love to sit down with Mr. Walters and talk with him about that. Mr. Walters stated that we need to plan while preserving. Leah DeLeo was present. She's a resident of the Heights. And she picked up my comment Corey Coleman made earlier to the effect that, the township should be brought into this discussion. And she said she agreed with that concept. She said she's willing to be a transparent voice of the Heights. She volunteered herself, and I think we appointed her that night. She said they want to preserve the neighborhood. It's a good opportunity for Perrysburg to be progressive and provide lower income homes. They do not want to be part of the city plan, but they do want to come up with something to protect, as Brody Walters had mentioned earlier. Kind of as the meeting wore down, Mark will work more than full time. He's going to be overtime pretty soon. He had a meeting set up already with the township trustee, and Leo was attending.
Yes, and very well.
And Brody was invited. So, I mean, we've got kind of an informal discussion going on. I think that, like we talked about, it might take, despite Paul's desire to get this settled sooner rather than later. It might take us a few months to work through this, but I think everyone agrees with the proposition. We should rush this through just to get an answer as opposed to getting it right now. George Thomas was present. He works for the Fair Housing Center, which serves Lucas and Wood counties. They had three principal suggestions. One is to consider more multifamily housing throughout the land use plan, including more affordable housing. The second is the need for more public transportation. And I think other public transit in the metro area. And the third is considering access for people with disabilities. I think Brody pointed out at that time that this is just the land use component of what will ultimately be a comprehensive plan, which has a lot of text that gets into some of those areas. You kind of begin with the piece with the land use plan and then move on from there. Teresa Acox, who lives on East 5th Street, asked about a moratorium if the Heights residents wanted to sell their property, and they contacted the city for annexation. In fact, put a moratorium on any of those transactions until we had a separate specific plan for the Heights. I responded that we try to respect the right of the property owners if they wish to sell their property, and generally speaking, the government should not take that right away. On another issue, Todd France, who's on Pratt, but said he made it clear he wasn't going to represent Pratt. He did say they voted unanimously on the property between King Woods and Brookhaven to encourage the development of it into a city park. Some of the council will recall we kind of had a very preliminary conceptual plan for that Brody had worked out. So I did respond to him that I think council has previously identified that as an area where we need to have a city park, and that's something we'll be working toward. He also talked about non-motorized paths. And I think finally Brody pointed out that the city's goal for a number of years now has been to collect money and put it in our Parks Development Fund to create larger, more versatile parks, rather than having a bunch of pocket parks you have to run around and all that don't really serve much purpose. The committee can't stop talking about fences, walls, and hedges and stream plantings. Brody Walters reviewed the document with the committee, the chart, and how he believes and agrees with Kate, I believe our law director, that the chart is organizationally correct. And our homework assignment for the next committee meeting is to look over and come back and see if we're ready to adopt it. Next, we talked about, I didn't know what a Comex box was, but for others don't know either, I guess it's these storage things. They're like train carts, or whatever you call it, a car on a train, and people can put them primarily in commercial projects and use them for storage. I think that night we heard we had a list of about 82 or 83 of these things around town, and in many of those cases they violate various provisions of our zoning code. Basically, Comex boxes we allow on a temporary basis when a construction project is underway, but they shouldn't be a permanent structure. Matt Temby came to talk to, he owns Vault Health and Fitness, the gym on East 2nd Street, the old post office. He pointed out that in the office and service zoning category, those facilities are limited to 5,000 square feet. Whereas he said there are many in modern development of gyms, there is a niche for those facilities that are around just shy of 10,000 or 12,000 square feet, but they wouldn't be permitted in office and service. He asked that that be considered, that change to take 5,000 to 12,000. And we agreed to refer that to the Planning Commission. Greg Beatty was present, and he talked about many situations which fences are being built right at the sidewalk. He suggests that people should not be allowed to build a fence within 3 feet of the sidewalk. And this is another potential code change. Brody and Mark are going to put their heads together on what could be done about that matter. Finally, Mr. Bernard Bear, who's a resident, he lives on Pine Street, but has a business, Gurley Drive, which apparently is the place where a lot of these Comex boxes are located. And we had a quite extended discussion about his property and it was annexed into the city and issues like that, but there wasn't really any action for the committee to take other than to hear a live example of what's going on with these Comex boxes and the issues. We adjourn that evening. We meet again on Wednesday, December 8th at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Any questions? Personnel?
Okay, I have no report tonight or legislation. I see my next meeting is scheduled for the 23rd. I don't know if I sent out an email on that to other personnel. I would like to reschedule that date. That's kind of...
Oh, something early. Did you suggest something in early December?
I think I... Anyway, either way, expect me to provide that email chain or...
Yeah, go ahead. I'm good with anything.
But I would go ahead and feel comfortable taking that off the calendar for the November 23rd date.
Okay, we can have it canceled and have it moved to the city calendar.
All right, perfect.
Are you going to circulate something on the new date?
Yeah, I will. I was looking, I saw the next Tuesday is free, the 30th. That would probably be the day I shoot for it. But I'll circle back with that email. I thought I had sent out an email.
Okay.
Nothing further than that.
Thank you. Hope you did me.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report. Our next scheduled meeting is on November 29th. at 6:30 p.m., which is a Monday and a change from the normal dates.
Thank you. Service Committee?
No report. My next meeting is November 29th at 5:30 p.m.
Any other business come before council?
I would just like to just make a quick comment. More taking the council hat off and putting the citizen hat on at this point, and really wanted to give a thank you to the fire department staff, specifically Jared, Mike, and I believe it was John, who came to our house November 7th at 12:30 a.m. It was probably one of the worst nights of our life, but I wanted to recognize them specifically for the professionalism and everything that they did. It really helped with us, and I just wanted to give them a thank you. So, just wanted to specifically thank them for how they handled everything and how much they really helped us.
I'll be sure to pass that along.
Any motion to adjourn? So, all in favor? Aye.